Yo, Jesus.
I know. It's hard. You get
Okay,
out of the.
it says you're the host, Kyle, so you should be good.
All right, yeah. I think we're rolling now. So
Perfect.
so
Thanks,
Dane, yeah.
everyone.
Dane, what uh I wanted to get you in and I want to talk about commercial properties specifically. A lot of times feel like there's not enough discussion. One of the things that as a person who's interested in commercial real estate and investments there is I find it hard to find the properties. Residential side, everything goes through the MLS. Why does that happen? What's your understanding of the commercial world and how do we find properties that are for sale, that are investment properties?
Is one of the reasons why I wanted to jump in and why we got so many calls in economic development is because the commercial world is very much still the Wild West, still very much fragmented. So the MLS is a private system, basically operated by the Realtors Association, and it has kind of been their bread and butter of everyone in residential kind of posting it in the same spot. And so if it's represented by an agent, there is a 99% chance it's going to be in the MLS, a very, very high probability. In the commercial world, there really never was a monopolistic system to take over the commercial world. There
Hmm.
actually, matter of fact, CoStar got close. There's the CoStar is the 90-pound gorilla. And you probably heard of its little brother, LoopNet. Those are all owned by the same entity.
Okay.
CoStar actually got sued because it was becoming a monopoly, and they forced them to break up a little bit. And so
Interesting.
in the commercial world, um, there are several sources that you need to take a look at. And even as commercial brokers, we're all over the board, right? So, ourselves personally, I use MLS. You'll find our commercial properties in MLS. Now, the challenge is if you go to like a Century 21 website where they're getting data in, it may not necessarily have a commercial function. So, you have to find a real estate agency that has a commercial click there. But even then, that's probably only 30-40% of properties that are out there. Myself, the other system that we use that's gaining some steam, it's not quite there, is Crexi, Crexi.
Yeah.
It's where you can find some additional information. It's free to use. It just requires your email address, and then you can go ahead and bruise properties. But really, the big one is CoStar.
Mhm.
So CoStar's business model is either you pay to access the information or you pay to display the information. Somebody has to pay. And so the first one is paying to access the information. That's CoStar.com. It's free to list properties. The vast majority of commercial brokers throughout the United States use CoStar. The problem is with when you're looking for information, unless you're willing to pay the fee, you can't access the information, right? And I honestly don't know what the fee is up to. Back when I was with the Economic Development Corp, we accessed it. I think we had a special nonprofit discount. I think it was $3,000 a year or something. Um, or brokers like myself is we do some listings in LoopNet. We typically rotate them, and so we'll pay to get them out there. Of course, if anyone's listed property in LoopNet, it's to the tune of about $130 a month if you're just doing one property. So it's kind of expensive. So you're absolutely right. Finding commercial properties can be a challenge. I've always noticed for more the duplex or mom and pop, Facebook Marketplace seems to be a pretty good place too to check out. But if I'm in someone's shoes and I'm casually looking, I'm going to be looking at MLS, LoopNet, Facebook, and Crexi. If you cover those four, you're probably doing the best you can, but knowing that there's probably another 50% of properties you will never see, and the only way to actually get access to them is to buy an access to CoStar or simply talk with a commercial broker and just ask to see what's out there and can you send me a report?
Yeah. Did you say Facebook is one of these that you're looking at?
Yeah, Facebook,
Okay.
when it comes to more of the smaller properties, I do find that Facebook has quite a bit out there. That's more of for sale by owner type stuff. But yeah, it's out there. I don't, it definitely would be part of my weekly check if you had one.
All right. So first off, just curious from the crowd here, and Dan Hansen is here. Dan does commercial real estate lending with Kohler Credit Union, and we had Dan on a couple weeks ago and interviewed him, and he did a nice job. Dan, I'm just kind of curious in some of these comments from Dane here. When people, your customers, are coming to you, Do you ever ask them, where are you finding these properties? You know, are these pocket listings? Or is it word of mouth? Are people using these sites? It looks like we're not hearing them. Probably my fault. More technical difficulties, Dan. I'm sure it's not you. In the interim, though, while we're waiting for Dan to connect up here, we did put some things into the chat here: the CoStar information, Crexi information, LoopNet, which Dane had just cited too. So, well, what about your own personal website then, Dane? So let me ask about that, right? Tell us about the company that you are part of, you collaborate with, and you have properties listed on your site. And if I'm not mistaken, though, some of those properties are not on some of these other sites, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, no. I mean, so yes, I do run my own website just for the Sheboygan office. I control just a Squarespace website. Our firm, NAI Pfefferle, if you go to naipfefferle.com, you will see all of our company's listings. As of the first of the year, I believe we are now officially the largest commercial firm in the state of Wisconsin. We just took over the Milwaukee market. And so there's 26 of us commercial brokers. I'm the only one covering kind of the Sheboygan, Manitowoc, Lakeshore area. This is just kind of where I decided where I'm going to focus. But the company's still mom and pop owned. John Pfefferle, who started the company, is still around. And the day we don't see him in the office, call the Undertaker. He's just one of those amazing go type of guys.
Sure.
And so the website that I have, really, our company's database feeds off of CoStar, right? So every time we put a listing in CoStar, that's what feeds our company's website, our primary company's website. And same too, if you go to any other commercial company like Founders 3 or CBRF, typically those are all CoStar feeds. And our website, this is my personal one that I control. If you go to available properties, more or less it goes to Crexi, because that's the best kind of free source I've found. And then if you click into market, are my Pacific listings. And the reason why I did that is a lot of times I like to take video. I like to take more images. I like to have different information. Sometimes Google Maps where I'll outline a property that you can't necessarily do in these other systems. So more or less, it's my cheat way of, all right, I'm going to give the information in the best way I know possible. And then I also have a link I can send people that obviously keeps them on my website, lets them explore some other properties. The standard marketing 101, just keep trying to drive them to your information. So.
Got it. All right. So first off, you talked about, if we went back to your site here, you have this link here to available properties. That's going to link up with Crexi that you referred to earlier, right? And I'm noticing right away it's pulling up Sheboygan properties. So is that because of the location of my computer, or is that, for the user, or is that by design?
No, it defaults to my listings, obviously, if I'm driving a link off of my website. But you could easily click on the upper left, change your search criteria, and search everything that's on there.
All right. So these are all the listings that you have that you're working with the sellers to market these properties and hopefully get them under contract, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then going back to your website, you have here a link to the market. And this is what you're talking about, where you give a little bit more detail about some of these properties. Is that right?
Yeah, so these are my attempt to better distill. If there's videos, this is where you're going to find it. Some additional information, this is where I'll put it. Sometimes documents, but not all the time. So, yep.
All right. So you got some in here for lease, some for sale. Guys, I'll tell you, when I'm, have some free time in my day or at night, right? And I'm like, all right, let's see what's out there. What are the potential investments in this area? Dane's site is one that I go to. He does a good job of updating them, giving information. And Dane, I think I'm part of maybe a CRM, an automatic email that goes out and, tells about basic like updates, new properties and things of that nature. Is there a way that people can sign up for that if they'd like that?
Yeah, there's a contact us on our website. Certainly they can reach out to me, my email's all over the website. And so I just look at folks who have wanted to just kind of keep in the loop. Plus, I also have an extensive list. I always kind of joke in commercial, I kind of equate to farming. It's like planting seeds. It's everyone that's an investor is an investor, and you don't know when and where they're ready to pull their next trigger on their next property.
Mhm.
And so, the best way I can describe the marketing efforts in commercial, because again, it's the Wild West, is we try to get information out to a couple key groups. Because if you're looking at investing, you're either talking with your banker, you're talking with your attorney, or you're talking with your CPA. And so, what we like to do, or a construction contractor, that's the other one. And so, every time we get a new listing, we like just to notify those groups as to what's new on the docket, because I don't know who they're talking to, and there's way
Sure.
too many people to keep up with.
Sure. Do you see that, Dan, on your end? First off, your comment, I'm sorry, I keep asking you questions and your mic isn't working. But Dan was saying that a lot of his investors get leads from word of mouth or pocket listings, but they all use a well-networked broker like Dane. Let's see, Dan, are you with us now? Not yet. No. Yeah, I don't know. You had it said a couple weeks ago when we had you on. But I think that's really cool. Like, I think that's part of it, and a good commercial, realtor who's giving that information to your network, right? Like you said, you don't know who Dan is talking to, and somebody might come in and just say, oh, I've got some money, I'm looking to park it somewhere, I'm looking to invest it. And now Dan says, well, look, turns out that Dane just sent me this property you might want to look at. And it's again that kind of who you associate with and who you know. So going to the bank doesn't happen as much anymore in the digital world, but hanging around the bank or hanging around an attorney or a CPA or a construction contractor could be fruitful, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, if anyone who's investing, they're either going to be fixing up properties, they're going to be buying properties. So, and plus, too, all those entities have an invested interest in sharing the information, because a banker wants another loan deal, a contractor wants to go ahead and fix something. So it's, I think that's more common than most people realize, is a lot of professional folks love to share information and what's doing what in the hopes of trying to get more business. That's just what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really kind of wanted to get into today some of the properties, and I feel, do you have like a list of some of your like you have a list of listings? I know that. Do you have some favorites though? And we won't tell. I guess we're public here, so I guess the non-favorite ones might know. But do you have some top ones that you just are like,
Well,
I don't know why this one's sitting around, right? Like every broker has these that are like, why is an investor not putting their money in this property?
Well, and it too, and just to be clear, we don't list only investor properties. A lot of my properties are either for lease or they're vacant, and so they're not necessarily meant for the investor. As a broker, we're trying to maximize the exit strategy, and thus, we really try to market it more towards if it's not an investment property, towards a owner buyer, an occupant, because they will pay the highest price, somebody who actually wants to use the facility.
Sure.
Investments overall right now are relatively down. I see them picking up this year. I think 2025 overall will be a good year, but I'm not expecting a full pickup till second quarter or so, and there's some reasons for that. But ultimately, right now I'd say I have 2 commercial properties that have income streams on them. One is a mixed use 9-unit downtown, 2 retail units, 7 apartment units, and then a car wash in Ootsburg. Now, I classify these very differently, right? When we're looking at how do we price a building, comps, what's going on, what we're really trying to figure out is at what rate of return will somebody purchase the property, right? And then we are marketing it at the high end of that range, knowing that's our job, is to try to sell that. The mixed use property is what I would call a much more traditional investment property. It is fully leased. Obviously someone can get more revenue.
Can we identify that property, Dane? Can I show
Yeah,
it?
that's 512 and 514 North 8th Street. It's right next to EOS Surf Supply, so it's right in the heart of what I would definitely call the retail section of Sheboygan. So if there was ever a retail building from a location standpoint downtown, the southern part of downtown of Sheboygan tends to be full all the time.
All right, so
There's just
here
more.
it is, right? This is
Yep.
the property. Does anyone else get excited about this like I do? I'm curious, Dan's getting excited. I just gotta pause for a minute. Like, I don't know, like I just get excited about the possibilities of it, right? So like I really kind of want to hear this. And then the investor side of me at the same time is like, I don't want anyone else to know, right? I don't want anyone else to
Well,
know. But then I'm
yeah,
like, what I come back to and is just doing and giving value to the world, right? Like there's enough for everyone out there, and maybe somebody can do really well with this, but it's that thing. Like you want it exclusively yourself, but I want to share it and help. Quick check in here. Sorry, Dave, stop the stream here. I got to check in though. Teresa, we haven't seen you in a while. Is 2025 off to a good start for you?
Yeah, it's been all right. Busy, but I wanted to see Dane. I haven't seen him for a while.
Yeah, awesome. Angie,
And bonus points that now I know how to pronounce that.
his last
Although
name,
I'm not, I'm no,
Pfefferle.
Pfefferle. Yeah,
Yeah.
Pfefferle. Yeah, that's not how I thought it was said.
Angie, do you have
Yeah.
a win for us? Any wins? You always have a win to report on.
I don't know. I went to the gym today,
There you
so
go.
that was a good thing.
A win. That's totally a win.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, back to the program. So keep counting those wins, guys. They're important. So 512 and 514 North A Street. Patrice has put the link in the chat. I'm going to show the property. And guys, if you're watching this on Facebook, and you want to come into the Zoom room and put any questions in here in the chat or chat with Dane about these properties, I'll get over to Facebook and I'll put our link over there so you can get in here. But all right, Dane, tell us about 512 and 514 North A Street, Sheboygan.
So it's what we call mixed use. So there's 9 total units to lease. 2 of them are the 2 retail on the first floor. Both are leased. Matter of fact, one tenant put in quite a bit of money. You can see at the finishes that they installed, the tenant paid for that. That's always a great sign to have a tenant investing in a property. And then there's the 7 apartments above, ranging from studio to mainly studio and 1 bedrooms. Pretty much most of them have had remodels since 2014. One completely gutted down to the studs and redone. And the nice thing about this one too is the question I always get is what's the condition of the roof? And in this case, one roof was replaced in 2014, the other one about a year or 2 ago. So from an overall condition standpoint and what needs to be done, obviously there's always improvements in an old building, but it's of downtown properties, it's actually in pretty good shape. And so this property, when we look at investment properties, we're always trying to figure out, again, what is someone willing to pay for it? And I don't know if anyone's ever kind of broken down the rough investment scale, and kind of commercial properties are so huge because it goes from, hey, maybe I want just a 4 apartment complex, more on par with like a duplex or a triplex investment scheme, all the way to government leasing, which is on the opposite end of scales of what buyers are looking for. Did you want me to run through kind of that broad range and kind of these categories? So most of you that probably invest in like duplexes or something, the general rule of thumb is 1% return every month. So you can figure out is a 12% annual return is cash on cash. So if you put $10,000 into your property, times that by 12%, boom, that's what you need to be making a month. And most so that's your, I guess, your base. And the reason why I think it's very much like that is when you look at your other investment options, right? If you have $100, you have multiple options to invest that in, and really, it's kind of on par with the S&P 500. If you invest in the S&P 500, you're going to make a 12% annual, 10 to 12% annual return without thinking, without doing anything, no stress. Plug it in. Forget about it. Look at it 20 years later. You just made 10 to 12% on the S&P 500 historically, right? So that's what people are trying to mimic in your, I don't want to say standard, but your most widely invested commercial properties. Plus you get the appreciation and paying down the loan because you're taking on some risk. The other thing, the other, so as you move into more risky, let me back up. So that is what I call standard. As you get into the business side of things, if you're looking at buying a business, you're more into, I need a return on the investment within 3 to 4 years. So 25 to 33% is if you're buying a business, if you're buying a restaurant, if you're buying a manufacturing facility, the actual company, the actual operations, right? So that's what that investment scale looks like. When you're looking at like car washes or laundromats, there's this weird half breed in between that 12% and that 25%. And because it is a business, you do have to be there, but you don't have to be there every day. It's kind of like I'm going to buy a part-time business, right? So the
Okay.
expected returns aren't that full 25 to 33%. They lie probably more in that 15 to 20% range, more than an apartment because you have to do more work, but less than a full-out company.
Okay.
As you move down that scale into commercial, let's say you were looking at a strip center. That's not quite full, maybe has some options. Or an older commercial property. We're typically see people wanting returns in that 8 to 12%. Again, 12% on par with that duplex, but a little bit less because the idea of commercial is supposed to be easier. You have less turnover. The tenant takes care of maintaining the facility, and you're doing leases that are typically 3 to 10 years long, right? So if you got a property that can do 5-year leases, which is most strip centers, you're not looking at I cannot match in commercial. We cannot match the return on investment that duplexes can have. What we can offer is a more easy management of a property.
Okay.
Now, as you get into what I call investment grade stuff, that is your true, that is a totally different market segment. That's like buying and selling a building that Starbucks operates out of, or buying and selling a building that a fast food restaurant, a Scooter's Coffee, that sort of thing. And that's a little bit different because at the core of it, when you buy a building and leasing it, you're lending money, right? And a company like Starbucks can go borrow money at a cheaper rate than you as a landlord can all day long. They could probably borrow money at 3-4% right now, and you're stuck borrowing at 7%. Now, why do they want to rent if their numbers tell them they should buy it? Well, the reality is that's how they're able to open up so many stores. They're taking on different sources of debt. Because again, remember, Starbucks' return on investment is 25 to 33%. So they'll borrow money at 7 or 8 all day long. They'll take every penny you got. And so that's what fuels their growth. The investment grade stuff, for example, our firm develops all the Dollar Generals in the northern half of the state, right? So when we sell our Dollar Generals, we're selling them at 6 to 7% returns, 15-year leases, triple net. You have a tenant that's going to pay for the building for 15 years. So kind of because you're borrowing money, it's more on par with a bond, with a corporate bond. Like if you were to invest money in the S&P 500 versus bonds are much less. They're usually 4 to 6%. Well, that's what this property sells like. So you're getting the rate of return of a bond, but again, like the duplex, you also you're paying off the building and it's appreciating, right? So it's a more hands-on way of borrowing money. And then you get to the extremes, the absolute extremes, and that is the government leasing, or some of your credit tenants. And if you're like looking to buy a post office or a federal building that the feds lease, I mean, you're talking 3 to 4% returns because again, it's more on par with a treasury note than anything else.
What's that return? 3 to 4%?
Yeah. They sell them very, very, yep. Because I don't want to say it's guaranteed money, but it's about as close as you're going to get. So when we look at investment property, we're really talking a span of 3 to like 33%. It's massive. And so you kind of need to understand which classification the buildings fall into. And there's a lot of gray area, right? What makes something investment grade versus commercial? Well, the answer is simple. It's the tenants. If it's a grade A tenant and a place that has 50 locations, it's probably investment grade. If it's a mom and pop store, it's probably commercial. So again, it's who are you borrowing money to?
All right, let's run through those categories here in just a moment. Dan wants to
Hello.
test out his mic though. He thinks he might have
Hold on a second.
might have solved it. So Dan, what do you got? Let's see. No, not there. I wonder what's going on.
I've been there.
Yeah. Um, he'll keep working on it, try to get it. Just I want to take some notes down because he gave some good definitions in there and good information. So number one, tell me about these different types again.
So the highest rate of return when you're looking at commercial, again, commercial brokers, whether they're residential or a commercial one like myself, we have the same license and we can also buy and sell businesses. That's allowed underneath Wisconsin law. So the highest rate of return is an actual operating business, and that's typically a 3 to 4 year payback. So and how long really depends on how easy it is to get into the business. For example, a restaurant or a bar, extremely easy to get into, right? So we might even be pushing a third down to 50, down to a 2 year payback at that point, because I don't want to, it's one of the easiest business to get into, where if you have something that requires a lot of capital, it might be closer to the 4 year payback, even a 5 year payback. So it depends on the industry.
All right, so we've got the operating business, purchasing that.
Yep. The next I would call the part-time businesses, because I don't have a better term. Those are your car washes, your laundromats, your maybe even a vending machine business, something that you don't need to be there every day, but you still need to check up on it.
All right, okay.
And then I would call your standard duplex home residential single family leasing. And most investors in there, that's pegged at usually 1% per month, so 12% annual return, cash on cash return.
All right, okay, go ahead, next.
Next, I would go to commercial. So a property that has a commercial tenant. I would say that's usually right now we're seeing 8 to 12%. So again, matching the duplex stuff, but there's some wiggle room for lower risk items.
Okay. And is there another one?
Yep. Then I would go investment grade, your commercial tenants. It's usually a 5 to 8% return. And by the way, by the time you're in the 5 to 8% turn, a lot of these sales are not taken on debt, right? And you ask yourself, why would anyone, when you take on debt, in theory, if there's enough margin, your returns start to skyrocket, right? Because you're not using your own money. But when we start getting an investment grade, we start getting into the family funds, we start getting into the pension funds, we start getting into where people have money and they got to park it somewhere type stuff. Because they've loaded up on they bought all the stocks and bonds they want, and they're getting bored, or they're just trying to simply diversify.
All right, so you're saying when you get into that area, generally people are not coming in with financing. They're coming in with cash from some source that they're putting down on this property.
You're competing against I don't know if Acuity does it, but you're competing against the insurance funds that are the reverse bankers, where they're getting all the money in, they're trying to invest in something safe that gets a little bit better return, and so part of their investment portfolio might be some real estate. For example, here's a fun fact: Taylor Heights, where Festival is, for a while was owned by the state of New York pension system.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why she sat dormant, because nobody cared. Nobody cared about it.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so does that get us our 5 categories?
And then I would say government. Government
That's right.
is an investment grade, but even more of a premium. Honestly, I don't know why because again, now you're basing it off the treasury bills, because you're borrowing the federal government money.
Where in here, Dane, do you put the multifamily properties, more than a duplex?
Commercial, it's and it's probably a breed between two of them. This isn't an exact science.
Sure.
So.
Okay, got it. I had a question just on on these, because we hear a lot about this in communities, right? And I've seen a lot of stuff locally too, a lot of pushback against some of these larger commercial operations and kind of the imprint that they leave on these communities, right? So you mentioned, I don't want to pick on them, but let's say Starbucks, right? Like Starbucks has a certain look to it generally for the most part, if it's a standalone building. So what happens when they leave? And we could also look at these bigger box, stores too, right? So
Yep.
what approach does an investor need to take in those investment grade properties? Because what you're saying is, hey, look, you're going to enter into maybe a 10, 15, maybe even 30-year lease with this company. It's going to give you a lot of security over time. But that property is kind of unique to that business, right? So what happens then?
Well, usually when you get a corporate entity, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to put deed restrictions on it, and they're going to deed restrict it against any competition, right? So odds are, unless it's in your lease, you probably can't put another coffee shop on it because these companies slam the door behind them. Deed restrictions can last 40 years. After that, it's a legal
Wow.
challenge to have them removed. But one thing when you're doing deals with corporate entities, that's a huge reason why you see strip centers and in great locations, nothing's going in them because they're deed restricted to the nth degree. It kind of becomes almost no man's land to a large degree. You can get them removed. There is process. Most companies are fairly reasonable if you can get to the right person. But it's a process.
Seems like the deed restriction is one of those things early on when they come in and they're like, hey, we want to pay you the next 15 years. We're going to occupy this spot. Seller's like, great, right?
Yeah.
And then they get to year 13, 14, maybe 15. They're like, who do I put in here? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm restricted on
So-
who can go in.
So that's what happened with Festival Foods at Taylor Heights is that, quite frankly, Walmart put a deed restriction for basically any retail over 10,000 square feet. And so when they left where Festival Foods is today, it basically became no man's land for a decade because that deed restriction was there. And there's a whole story on how that got released. But so the first thing is that I'm a firm believer that when you're buying investment grade commercial properties and you're worried about the long term, get that debt paid down as quickly as you can. I think when you go into the mindset of these properties, it's not necessarily your parking money is what it boils down to is you're not looking necessarily for the cash flow, you're looking for the appreciation because these corporate entities like Starbucks, they go for the best corners. That corner today that's the best is probably still going to be a great corner for 20 years from now, right? And plus two, construction costs are skyrocketing, right? So when you're looking at fast food restaurants now, they're paying $40-$50 a square foot for space right now because that's how much it costs to build it. So you're looking 20 years down the road, another 20 years of inflation, you may have a building that you can't get another coffee shop in, but you probably got a building now that's, 2/3 of the way paid off and working now with clients that are willing to pay $70 a foot with a slight remodel into a sub shop, right? So that is kind of the appeal for these long-term investors is that they know what at the end of the day they have a great piece of real estate.
Sorry, Dane, I'm going to put into, I can't wait till I get our technology figured out. Just into the chat, the call information with the Zoom link. So it's out there. It's just really super interesting stuff that you're talking about because so many people go in, you have to have, you hear about this, have an exit plan, right? Before you go into a property. And it's hard because you also can see, maybe something coming in, a good return, right? You're intrigued by that and you overlook the long-term potential pitfalls in some of these properties. But where do you like to work with? What are some of your favorite property types that you feel like is kind of your bread and butter? Do you have some that you'd like to push, that you'd like to list?
Well, general commercial, I would joke, my goal here was not to make a multimillionaire another million, right? That's not why I'm working in Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
Right.
At the Economic Development Corp, I absolutely loved working with entrepreneurs, trying to start new things and just kind of changing their family, as what Dave Ramsey called change your family tree, right? And so that's who I get most excited working for. Right now I've got a family kind of, they've got bunch of kids, they're looking at leasing an event space, leaving their corporate job and jumping into something that they always wanted to jump into. And that's the exciting part, is that when I see people making that jump out of their careers, and most people love their careers, but at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that individuals working for themselves are the most productive people on the face of the planet. So,
So I haven't heard that term before. I'm familiar with Dave Ramsey, but so what does he say? Changing the family tree?
yeah, he's a big
What does that
proponent
mean?
of building wealth very conservatively. And he's like, you can change your entire family tree in a generation by doing it right. And by not buying into, you got to buy this, you got to buy that. Now, obviously me selling commercial real estate and Dave Ramsey being a proponent of never taking on debt, even to buy investment property, I could say, I believe with him on the consumer side, avoid as much as possible. But if you're going to start a business and do something, that is very likely needed.
Yeah, for sure. Dan, I think we could hear you talking there. So welcome in. So changing the entire family tree, it's another concept it's similar to a concept, I think, from a book called, I think it's called The One by Ed Milet. You guys might recall we had David Bruno on. He's an attorney from New Jersey, and he talked quite a bit about this Ed Milet. And I did read the book, The One, and what he's talking about, one of the concepts was that in every family, there's like one person that comes along and just kind of makes it like substantially changes the direction of like the family. So when you're saying change your entire family tree, it reminds me of that, right? The entrepreneur that goes in and gets out of that mold, that cycle that kind of keeps people at a level, does something entirely different, and then that impacts positively the rest of the people. So that's kind of interesting. Dan, are you with us now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right, yeah. We're all waiting with bated breath. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to be with you all. Thank you so much, and sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Feel free to jump in at any time if you want to, if you have any thoughts on this, but
Kyle, can you repeat the name of that book one more time?
yeah,
And the author?
Yeah, I want to get it right. I think it's called The One, I believe is what it's called. I want to go back to your properties here though, Dane. So tell us about 514 North A Street, just a little more detail on that. We're moving quickly here, slowly
Yeah.
and at the same
So
time.
I don't want to confuse people with the nomenclature, but I'll mention some of this and I'll kind of explain, what it means. So when you look at a property, this particular property produces $78,000 in gross revenue, right? So at the end of the year, you have $78,000 that come in. Effective, and then from there you subtract a vacancy, usually 5% or so, assuming that you're just gonna have natural turnover in it.
Okay, sure.
And then you start subtracting your operational costs, right? So every time you look at a commercial property, it's not just the property taxes, it's not just your utility payments. Your property insurance is actually becoming more and more important because it's becoming more and more difficult to achieve right now. It's kind of a pain. But on top of all that, you also have two other expenses that sometimes people don't take into account, right? The first one is your management costs. Whether you do it yourself or you hire a third-party company to do it, and our firm does commercial third-party property management, there's a cost associated with just simply keeping an eye on the property. In the commercial world, that's usually 3 to 5% of your revenue. In the residential world, I understand it's usually around 10%, right? So for a mixed use in here, you could factor in 5 to 7, 8%, depending on that's a little bit subjective. And that's the fun part about these last two, is they're kind of subjective.
Mhm.
And then the last one is your capital reserve, right? Roofs are going to go, windows are going to go, the big ticket items are going to happen. They don't happen often, but when they do. So we often encourage people to have a capital reserve, usually somewhere in the range of 3 to 5% of, again, their net revenue. Just take that. You can keep the money, you can spend it, but just know that sooner or later that's going to come up somewhere down the road. So by the time you subtract all those off, it generates what we call net operating income, or NOI. That's the big one in investment properties and commercial. It's all about NOI. You can kind of think of it as EBITDA for a business. And NOI is net operating income. On this property, it's roughly $53,000. That is what you are left to pay yourself and any source of debt that you have, right? So if you pay cash for the property, you will make $53,000 a year. If you borrow money, obviously it's that minus whatever you have. Now, in commercial properties, and in any real estate, the advantage of real estate over other types of investments, the downfall is you have to have a bunch of cash or a bunch of be very credit worthy to take it on, right? Where if you're in the S&P 500, you can literally go on Robinhood or work with an investment person and put in, as little as $50 probably to start your account. It doesn't take much. In commercial real estate, not only do you make your cash on cash return, but you also get the appreciation of the asset. Now in Sheboygan, it's hard to really determine the appreciation, right? It's not a big deal here in the upper Midwest as it is, say, if you were in Atlanta, Georgia, or Dallas, Texas, because those markets are growing so rapidly. Your building could be worth 5% more by next year simply because it exists. In Sheboygan, I'd be very conservative on that number, but the real benefit is the tax benefit. Commercial properties depreciate over 27 and a half years. So every year you get to write off 1/27th of your purchase price. So let's say you buy a building for, I don't know, $500,000 divided by 27. That's roughly $18,000 a year you get to write off. So you get $18,000 home tax free on your income side. Now, when you go to sell the property, the government is patient, but it'll eventually get its money. You will have to write that as capital gains unless you're able to roll that over into a 1031 exchange. So think of it like when you buy or sell a stock with your stockbroker, you sell a stock and you buy another stock, and you sell it for 10,000, you buy another stock for 10,000. At the end of the day, you don't really owe the government anything because you just stuck it right back into the investment. Same thing with real estate, but real estate requires a lot more paperwork to do that, and some conditions on it. So it's possible. Actually, so I guess what I'd say is that's so again, this property, $53,000 a year in revenue. Question is how do you slice that?
Couple questions here in the chat for you. Angie was asking how you feel about life insurance as a backup plan to repay debt tax free. Do you have any comments on that?
I'm not sure. Are you talking about life insurance that has some sort of payout benefit?
Yeah, like whole life insurance. So say like you start a business and then maybe you can't pay them back or whatever. I mean, could you just borrow against that?
Well, here's the thing is I don't feel qualified to talk about insurances, but I will say this from what I've experienced with the Economic Development Corp and typically how these deals work. So almost always a bank is going to require that you have life insurance sufficient enough to cover your personal debt and the debt you owe on the company, right? So you're going to need life insurance. I don't think you need whole, term is probably perfectly fine because at the end of the day, they're covering all their bases. When a bank,
do you guys look at life insurance when you're doing commercial properties?
Like, could you use that as an asset?
that gets more into the infinite banking thing, and to me, that's the dark arts unless you are worth hundreds of millions and have the money to do it.
I was just curious how you felt about that because
I'd be leery. I'll speak to it because I sell whole life insurance.
okay.
I'd be leery about borrowing from the cash value of your whole life because it implodes the value of your whole life policy later down the road. So it kind of kicks it out and it shortens the duration and the value of the whole life value in the future. So I personally am not a fan of whole life insurance. In most cases, it has benefits. The other thing to keep in mind with whole life insurance is that should you ever have like a long-term care situation or a disability type situation, the state will make you forfeit that policy.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I was just thinking with whole life, you can always borrow against it, like while you're still alive, you know?
Mhm.
And I mean, sometimes that's like the best option for people. And for me, like as an entrepreneur, like I don't have a retirement plan in place. So like for me, like whole life would probably, well, it is like my best option. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at, but I know that like in about 2 years, um, as long as I make the premium payment, I mean, I could technically borrow my own money to like invest in anything I want.
Yeah, but it does remove from the value of the insurance policy itself.
Well, right, like so like my, children that I leave my benefits to, that obviously would be deducted from whatever payout would be left, right? So, I mean, but if I make a great investment in something that I know is guaranteed money back, then basically I'm just making sure that they have a business and I'll pay like that money back into my whole life. So then insurance. So, I mean, I think that would probably be, well, that is like, I think my best option at this point.
She's on a path. She's on a path. I was just curious though, Dan, when you're looking to qualify at the credit union, investors, and you ask them for like a personal income statement, I'm assuming number one, you ask for that. Are you looking at whether they carry life insurance?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. If we're doing a C&I loan, for a business owner or investment property, those things are a little different, right? Premium financing, I know, is becoming a little bit more popular. It requires more paperwork, obviously, to get beneficiaries changed and whatnot. So it's essentially from my world, if we're gonna look for a 20 to 25% cash injection from the borrower at a minimum, if that's going to be kind of brought to the table purely in like premium financing, it just it's a riskier endeavor for everybody involved. So it's something that we have done before, but certainly not very typical.
I love the knowledge though in the conversation. Like it's an idea, Angie, right? That's why
Yeah,
we
I was just throwing it out there to
it's
see what you guys
ideas and
thought.
like what exists out there or not. So I love that.
Well, one thing that made me think of that's kind of really cool, and you don't think that it's an option, but for a lot of people that are starting or buying a business, I saw it quite a lot. And that is using, you mentioned you don't necessarily have it, but using a 401k or an IRA or some sort of retirement. Now, typically in a bankruptcy, retirement funds can't be accessed.
Right,
But the federal government says, hey, if you have money in your 401k, it's got to be invested into company or into whatever you want, but it's got to stay in this pool that's separate from you as an individual for all the income to be tax free or get the tax benefits. But they don't say what you have to invest it in. And so there's a whole industry out there that says, okay, let's say you got $200,000 in your 401k and you finally want to make the jump out of living corporate and into personal, you can use that 200,000, create an LLC, put that 200,000 as equity to buy your building, just so long as any income of that building goes back into that pool.
right.
It can be used as a source of equity to kickstart a business or kickstart an investment. I know a gal who did that. The gal who runs all the Airbnbs in Kohler, she's quite forward. She took her entire 401k, slammed it into Airbnbs years ago, and her entire retirement income is based on those Airbnbs now. So you just got to be mindful and work with a CPA to make sure you don't cross the line. But it's amazing that all these tools are out there that people think are pretty narrow, but the reality is that there's no rules against a lot of stuff.
Right, there's some pretty good ideas for you guys to think about. Just a couple of things. So it's 12:54. My schedule, I am a lawyer and I have to go to court sometimes. So today I'm going to court and So, typically we like to go till 1:15. We haven't got into the car wash yet. So I want to talk about that, Dane. And then after that, I will probably have to exit at 1 o'clock. I will have to. But Patrice, I will make the host, and she's going to keep things going if you all want to talk about these commercial properties and other issues on it. So let's talk about your car wash here, Dane. I'm showing my screen, and can you all see this? Give me a,
Yeah.
A little fuzzy, but yep.
okay. All right. So here's your car wash. This is in Oostburg, Wisconsin. All right. Tell us about it.
So this car wash actually, it has a little bit of a history. Back in 2014, the owner kind of went bankrupt and never shut anything down. So all the pipes bursted, all the pumps broke. The good news is that every piece of equipment in there is 2015 or newer now. The owner just is looking to get out. He's at the retirement stage. This one produces last year about $85,000 a year in income, and the NOI, or the end of the day profit, was roughly around 2,000 a month in income. So a nice, perfect side gig for someone to wants to earn some extra money. Again, we have it priced for a double-digit cash-on-cash return. So for under $50,000, you should be able to own a car wash. We've already seen the impact of what Quick Trip did in the market. They entered the market in 2022, so 2023 numbers is with another car wash in town. But the owner hasn't stuck a thought, and probably he goes in 8 years of any sort of marketing promotion. I don't think there's even I don't know if it's even on Google Businesses. He's got a Facebook page. He said he hasn't visited in like 3 years. He does sell memberships, but again, he has done nothing to promote it. So I think this one has some nice upside. I like the fact the equipment is relatively new. And if anyone knows the community or lives in the Oostburg area, it's a very tight-knit community. So if you get a good reputation right away, that means a lot in these small towns. So
Okay, so this is one of those where you kind of call it like a part-time business almost, right? Because what
Yep.
you're not just, you're investing in the land and doing nothing, right? I mean, you have to operate this car wash.
Yep.
And you kind of hear like car washes, laundromats, those sorts of things seem appealing to people. So you described a little bit, but tell us again. So what does a potential investor owner have to do with this property? What are some of the day-to-day or month-to-month type things that the current owner is doing?
Yeah, so the current owner, he's cleaning out the area. So if someone comes in there with a big dually and leaves a bunch of mud, just kind of getting that out of the way or spraying it down. Recharging the chemicals. There is a company that comes and drops off the chemicals, but obviously it needs to be filled up. But the reservoirs are plenty big. Collecting all the quarters. Get ready for quarters. Hopefully you got a big bag. And he does do some repairs himself, but the bulk of the repairs are really done by, so this is very much, there's a lot of industries that do this, but the same industries that like sell the chemicals and the soap are the same companies that do the big repairs, right? So the system is designed that if something's going wrong, he's going to get, I believe he says, an email that says, hey, something's wrong, check it out. And he'll decide whether or not he wants to take care of that personally, or he's going to call the company to do it. Now, this particular owner is more than happy to show somebody the ropes, to stick around for a couple of weeks post closing and kind of, yep, for this I do this, for this I do that.
So the asking price is 279,000. Is that correct?
I will say he's motivated, and we are in the process of a price drop right now.
Okay. You've got 3 bays, so one is automatic and the other 2 are self-serve, is that right?
Correct. Okay. And the other thing is that what we're seeing in this industry, it's much more membership based. That's how these big club car washes are being built and paying premium prices.
Right.
The other thing too, I'm surprised that it's not here. I don't see too many car washes. I saw them all the time when I lived in Illinois. In Illinois they have pet washes attached to all these.
Sure. Right.
But I don't see that here.
No, I noticed there's some campers on this property. So does this owner, is he also, getting any sort of rent from people that are wanting to store their campers here?
Yeah, I think those are personal and family members. But since the municipality has allowed him to store them, I can't imagine why they wouldn't allow the next owner to store. But that's between you and the municipality.
Got it. Hey, Dan, do you like?
There's a nice
Go ahead, Teresa.
I was just going to share, there is Oostburg, that is my hood. There's a local advertisement that goes out called the Lakeshore Weekly that is widely inexpensive to market in, and he does not advertise in it. Like it would
Okay.
be the easiest thing to pop a recurring advertisement.
Yeah. Yeah, good idea. Quick, Dan's got to go. Dan, I have a question for you. Do you like lending on car washes like this?
So that's kind of a loaded question. So certain industries like dry cleaners and car washes are going to come with environmental concerns. Something like this, we would require a phase 1, environmental from an engineer consultant. That's going to run the borrower, north of a few grand up to $5,000. So it's a pretty big investment just to find out if it's even viable or not, or what kind of remediation needs to occur. So the other side of that is, as you mentioned, the quarters, any cash business, in the banking world also throws up some red flags. We just want to, oftentimes what's happening is the company's making more money than it's showing, and that's not always a good thing from our perspective. So those are the two things, but he's very spot on that the membership model is really where it's headed.
Environmental, what's the second red flag?
Any kind of cash business is always just a little bit more scrutinized. But Dane is spot on that they are moving towards a membership-based model and far more credit card sales than anything.
Got it. What I love about this is we got Dane's perspective, we get Dan's perspective, right? This is what you have to do when you're an investor. Just keep asking questions and work down that line of certainty until you say, yeah, this is a right fit for me or not. So Dan, thanks for joining us today. I'll be connecting with you tomorrow. So I have an email that
Yeah, perfect. One thing I wanted to jump in before all the technology issues. Oftentimes what we're running into, with investment real estate is rates are a little bit higher and they have been elevated post-COVID, right? And also appraisal values real estate values have also, been elevated. And so what we're running into is cash flow issues. And so that's something that we work with potential borrowers on all the time is if you can get the tax returns from the seller, we can run spreads and determine what kind of debt the business or property can support. Because as you well know, Dane, what something is worth, what it can sell for, and what it can support are all, different figures. We're hoping they're going to be close, but that was the main thing I wanted to jump into. And I put it in the chat, but we factor in the 10% vacancy for investment properties. So if you think about something like in a duplex, while you were mentioning that's kind of a nice investment, you lose one tenant and your cash flow is cut in half. So it's a little riskier. Sometimes the larger units, the 8 to 12, those kind of underwrite themselves. Those are a lot more able to support any kind of vacancies.
Perfect. Great insight, Dan. Thank you so much. I apologize.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, for sure. I apologize too for the technology issues that we had. And I hate leaving early. I do have to go, but Dan, we didn't really get to talking about, or Dane, I'm sorry, small towns and investing in small towns. They kind of hit on it a little bit, and you had some real world examples I think you maybe wanted to talk about today of successful real estate developments. So those are some of the bullet points that I wanted to hit on before I left, but I do have to go. I'm gonna let Patrice take the reins. And if you guys want to continue, great. I hope you do. Dane, I will be connecting with you and want to bring you back here sometime. Teresa, it's great to see you again. Carla joining, Schmidt joined, and Sunny and Angie, of course. Thank you guys. I have to leave, and I wish you the best. So I feel weird leaving my own meeting, and here I go. So see you later.
Take care.
Thank you, Dane.
It's okay. We'll carry on without you, Kyle.
All right.
All right, Dane. So I'm not as well versed in real estate as Kyle is, but if you want to touch on any other items or if anyone has any questions, now's the time to ask or discuss.
Yeah, I would say I don't necessarily have a whole lot to touch on. The big thing, when it comes to small town investing, some of the smaller communities versus say Sheboygan versus in Milwaukee is I think it's highly different in a couple different ways. One is the appreciation factor isn't quite there in a small town. The second one is also your reputation is very much more important in a small town versus a large community. But the other thing is when it comes to, say, actual development or construction or anything along those lines, is that a building in Milwaukee costs the same to build, whether it's, or a building costs the same to build, whether you're in Utzberg, Sheboygan, or Milwaukee. It costs the same. And so, that's why I think you're seeing larger communities expand much quicker, is because the appraisal values are there, the markets are there. And unfortunately, I think that's a big reason why a lot of small towns are being left behind, is because the rents you need to get in Plymouth, Wisconsin are the same rents you need to get in Menominee Falls to build the same apartment building. There's just no way around the numbers unless you have a municipality that's willing to much cover the difference with incentives, TIF districts or other things. So it is an uphill battle from a small town perspective, but at the same time, it's a personal battle. So
Great. Thanks for sharing, Dane. Anyone have any questions? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I can let you all
Yeah.
go a little early here. If you think of anything, though, I will be sending out an email with a recap, and it'll have Dane's contact information in there. So you can always reach out to him after.
great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye.